before we dive in, let's just talk a little bit about what we're doing here today. So today is a little different. We're also been working on this new thing called Spectre Collective for the past few months. What is it, right? So developers build, security finds cracks, and developers move fast. And sometimes maybe you think security slows things down. It's the same dance every time, every company and every industry leaving some kind of exhausted. So here at Reversing Labs, we've been thinking a lot about a space between the two disciplines. And what if we stopped treating them like different worlds? What if we kind of created a place where developer learning about supply chain threats could hang out in the same hallways as those who are into the security and malware behaviors world? So that's why we're building this new community, and each month we'll be changing topics that'll range from software supply chain, threat modeling, or developer productivity engineering. So let's get to it today. Today with me, I'm very excited. We have two phenomenal guests. We have Baruch Sidorsky and Veldette Kamai, and they're coming to us both today who are from Europe. I mean, Baruch, you might be on the road today, I think. But
Yes.
before we get started, I'd love to give the folks at home who are on this webinar to learn a little bit more about who you are, why you're interested in this topic, and where you are calling in from today. So, Veldette, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for having me, and thanks for all the attendees here today. I'm happy to share insights with you. Yeah, where I'm calling in from is basically in Germany, near to Frankfurt. I'm living here for the past few years, running an IT company with different kind of focuses, more on identity and access management, privileged access management, security, all around, and a lot of development in the identity and access management lifecycle. So really happy to be here and share the insights with you.
Perfect. Thanks for being here. Baruch, where are you calling in from today?
So today, particularly, I'm Valdet, like next door neighbor. I am maybe 20 minutes away from Frankfurt, and just been doing a bunch of conferences back to back. And day after tomorrow, great conference called Voxdex Luxembourg is starting. So this is where I'm heading, and just like stopping away to participate in this webinar. I'm a head of developer relations in the company called Toxcare. I'll put the link in the chat. Toxcare is providing secure libraries and applications and system level components for Linux for endless life support, basically for artifacts which might have been end-of-life by official producers of the artifacts. We kind of pick up the slack and make sure that if you still have to use them, you will be secure and won't be exposed to any threats. My background is on this merge between development, productivity, and security in general, and DevSecOps in particular, supply chain, this kind of stuff. So today's topic is very, very relevant for what I'm doing, and I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, Baruch, thank you so much. I know I saw you give a presentation a few years back about DevOps and just, kind of basing it on the Phoenix project. So that always makes me chuckle when we talk about this topic. So enough of me rambling. Why don't we dive into the meat and potatoes of today? Today, we're talking all about developer productivity without compromising security. So we're here to talk about practical strategies, real-world examples, and quick wins to help teams ship code faster while staying secure. So before we get into more of the serious hardcore questions, why don't we start with the basics? How do you define developer productivity engineering, and how is it different from traditional DevOps or developer enablement? And why is this such a big topic right now in the developer space?
Baruch, might you start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Was it me? Yeah, I can go ahead. Yeah, sure. So let's talk about productivity. I mean, it's basically all about productivity, but we somehow, I think we just deep dive into many other stuffs, like having many tools, having more secure code developing, And then I think productivity is getting down. So when it comes to, let's say, software secure supply chain or software development life cycles, we need to be maybe a little bit more efficiently, maybe more how to call it, without compromising quality, of course, without compromising security, but to define better standards, better frameworks, to have policies written down, just to make sure that we are sure how a good life cycle is looking at, and how the security will be the outcome for all of it. Maybe having plans before doing that, having really target and aims, what we're looking for, understanding the need, what's really important, and then working towards that goal. But let's share some insights with Barrett as well.
Yeah, well, the excellent points. To go maybe up a little bit one level, let's talk about what the difference between generally like all aspects of developer productivity and particularly the solutions with developer productivity engineering. So developer productivity is a bunch of stuff, like having a good coffee machine so people won't fall asleep in the office is an important tool for developer productivity. And but allowing people to take naps during a day, it's also a very important practice for developer productivity, having enough sleep at night, and what's not. There are tons of techniques of how you can you elevate your personal productivity, or how can your boss and your work environment help with that. The engineering part is much narrower. This is about what do we do in terms of best practices for software engineering and software development to make us, the developers, more efficient. And those two parts are very much obviously interconnected and entangled. For example, one of the most important things that you can do in developer productivity is reduce context switches. And what helps reduce, and this goes into psychology, behavioral psychology, and human behavior of what we do when we do context switching. That you know, the multitasking is not a thing, and actually when you are distracted and trying to do two things at once, you are actually doing both things worse than if you were focused at each one at a time. Coming from this idea of how our brain works into what works for us as developers, suddenly we discover like shortened feedback loops is the most important aspect of reducing context switches. And just like that, we switched from how our brain works to the fact that we need like a faster build. Right. Another aspect might be specialization versus generalization. We know that doing the thing that you are expert in will be generally more productive for you than trying to figure out something that you have no idea what to do with. And this is how suddenly it's connected to security. Security is vastly complicated domain. And developers are usually not expert in security. So how can we maintain productivity when we have those security threats looming in our work? Our managers might demand and not only demand, but actually put some kind of I don't want to say blame, but at least responsibility on our shoulders to make sure that our software is secure. But if security is not our domain, how do we still manage to solve those problems while being productive? So we're talking about this kind of productivity which relates to software engineering in particular, and not generally any kind of what can help us being more productive. So that's kind of to your question. It's kind of a definition from a negative, more like what it is not. But I think we can define what is developer productivity engineering part based on that.
I like that explanation though, where you say what it's not. You know what I mean? So you're making very clear as to what it's not, so you can deduce what it is. And Valdet, I saw you nodding along, so please share our
Yeah.
your thoughts based on that.
I like the introduction. It was fantastic. So of course, a coffee machine is one of a must-have in a productive environment. So it's very important. And I really liked that part where we were talking about having experts, generalization, specialization. So it's all, is it let's say doing the right thing or doing the things right? You know, what do we want? You know, which one is better? And I think this also, or do what you like to do. So let those people write the code because they like it, not because they have to do it or they must do it. So let them be free, let them bring their thoughts in, listen to them. I think this will really, let's say, boost the productivity of all of them.
Absolutely, absolutely. Letting people do what they're passionate about will definitely make them more productive than doing stuff that they don't like. This is like a basic common sense. We all know it, I think, from kindergarten when we were asked to do stuff that we didn't like, and it wasn't so nice as doing stuff that we did.
Indeed.
So you both kind of alluded to security. You mentioned it, right? Touched on it, but we didn't get into kind of the nuts and bolts of this. So where does security fit into the productivity equation? Can productivity improvements actually enhance security outcomes, or is it the other way around?
That's a great question, Kari. And I think from like what I mentioned is that security is particularly hard to like it's a curveball into our productivity routine because how complicated and multifaceted it is. Right. So there are many aspects of security, starting from physical security of having the door locks, right, and then going through making data in motion secure and making data in rest secure, and stuff like certificates and secure traffic, and then all the way to completely unrelated aspects like the software supply chain, which is about dependency management and making sure that the dependencies that we use are coming from trusted source and are actually trustworthy and what's not. And it's all under the same umbrella of security, but we are talking about vastly different expertise. And this is where it becomes problematic for developer productivity, because when a developer is in charge of all those aspects, it is almost impossible to expect him to be or her to be an expert in all those areas.
Yeah.
And then the question is what's next? If they are required to do though, they will probably start spending time in trying to figure out what they need to do and how they need to do it. And again, this is a complicated domain. And obviously, while they try to do it, they will probably waste a lot of time of trying to figure out what is the right thing to do, and probably won't get it right anyway, not because they're stupid or unproductive, but just because this is a complicated domain outside of their area of expertise. And so what can we do? There are a couple of solutions. The first is obviously abstractions. And here, the things that come to mind are amazing projects like, for example, Spring Security. Spring Security is a sub-project of the Spring framework that simplifies drastically the entry point that you need to know in order to develop secure applications. You can easily implement stuff like authorization and authentication without getting into the really nitty-gritty details about how to do it. And the market has a lot of those kinds of applications, especially for authentication part. For some reason, well, we probably know the reason because it is complicated and critical, but historically, the authentication part got a lot of attention, and both in terms of standards and in terms of tools that we can use in every stack and with every technology. There is a library that allows you to implement easy authentication. Authorization, it's a different kind of beast. Only in the last couple of years, we see again those frameworks and tools that make it easier. And I'll mention one which is called permit.io, that I'm honored to be their advisor, and they're doing an amazing job for that. And again, I'm going to leave it in the chat so people can take a look. And those kind of tools help.
Agree. I'm just want to share something else. I mean, we've mentioned a lot of frameworks and tools, etc. I also think a really important part is like having regular security awareness. You know, just having training. Just tell people what is security all about. It's basically somehow like a phishing mail, or what is a spam mail, or what does, you know, what does it look like? What feels real and what feels fake? Just to have that on a regular basis, to have security awareness training for everyone, and not just focusing on tools, not just focusing on solutions, but knowing what is security. You know, how do I make the best of that security? And I got one more thing on my mind. I just lost it.
Authentication.
I'm dealing a lot with authentication as we are primarily focusing on identity management and privileged access management. So it's also all about security and access to other systems, etc., with accounts and all that identity lifecycle management, etc. But there was some other interesting part. I just let it. Maybe it will come up again. Yeah, having a, I don't know. Maybe
So
maybe
maybe you had in mind what I had in mind as a second thing. So as I mentioned, the first thing is really abstractions, and those tools and frameworks are the ones that really provide developers with an easier way to do it. Not necessarily easy, but at least easier. The other thing is obviously, as we talk about specialization, is delegation of those concerns to the teams, people, companies that this is really their expertise, right? And here something like the umbrella can really help, because in the end of the day, when you hire people who are knowledgeable in this particular domain, that can really help a lot. And obviously, shameless plug, TaxCare is also in exactly the same game, right? So when a team of developers are facing this challenge that, hey, there is a security vulnerability is one of the libraries that we use, and there is actually no patch exists for this library because the official maintainer decided it's an end of life for them. Instead of trying and figuring out how do I patch this library myself, and probably getting it wrong, not because those developers are stupid, but because it's outside of their area of expertise, and that's a very complicated topic. Relying on a service that will provide you with secure artifacts can definitely help.
Yeah, and it just came up to my mind, so I've written it down to not forget it again. It was about libraries and frameworks. So I just wanted to say, it makes sense to have dedicated trainings to know which frameworks and libraries are out there. It's not about creating new ones, but use those which are established and tested for years. You know, so take the best of it and use it for your software.
Yeah, you gotta love those free tools that can help you figure out what the best, like the cream of the crop is, especially in open source too. There's just so much richness in free tools. You know what I mean? Like here we have SecureThe, where we can reveal, you know, kind of a safe assessment on these different packages. So it's like, hey, is this good to use? Is it not? Maybe, you know, what else does it affect? Because as you both mentioned, you know, software supply chain security is just a big topic that can have multi facets. So We've talked about what developer productivity is, how security kind of fits into the equation. Let's talk practical implementation, right? What are kind of the first steps that organizations can take to start improving their developer productivity while still being secure, but doing that in a meaningful, measurable way? It's not just measuring, metrics to say we're measuring it or checking a box. Like these are actual, what are the metrics that people should be looking at instead of just saying like, check, we're doing something.
Yeah, no, that's another great question, and it's a generally question of how do you measure productivity, right? Developer productivity. It's a huge and very loaded, I would say, topic, and there are different opinions, and there are some stuff that we all agree that it's just bad. Like the output of developers cannot be measured in like lines of code, for example. But what is the right management? What is the right measurement? And there are a number of attempts to build a framework about that. How can we can think about it? And one of them, it's called the SPACE framework. And again, I'm going to paste here in our chat the link to it. The authors of this framework, you might know some names. For example, Dr. Nicole Forsgren, who was one of the one of the original authors of the DORA, that's DevOps Research and Assessment Institute, that came up with the DORA metrics and the State of DevOps report. And other important people like Brian Hawk from Microsoft, and Professor Margaret N. Story from University of Victoria. There are a bunch of people that kind of came together and started to think like, hey, after we came up with this framework of DORA for DevOps, which is also kind of hard to measure, maybe we can tackle the aspect of developer productivity as well. And SPACE is an acronym standing for, and I'm trying to find it here because I obviously forget.
You don't have it memorized?
I'm ashamed to admit that I do not. Yeah, no,
Just teasing.
I don't see it right now out of the top of my head, but the idea there is that evaluation should be complex and built about a number of aspects, which not all of them are direct output. It's also interesting that what it's important for business as a measurement of productivity, and what is important for individuals, or I would say like generally the people who do the work, are not necessarily the same, but they are both important. And SPACE framework tries to answer those both questions. So this is a very interesting framework to look and read about. And there was also one follow-up over. Here we go. I found it. So here we go. S stands for satisfaction, and this is how developers feeling fulfilled about their work. P stands for performance, and this is an outcome of a system, of a process. A is activity, and this is something that we can actually measure that was done or delivered. And this is not as stupid as line of code, but it can be work items. For example, pull requests or commits or code review, this kind of stuff. C is communication and collaboration, and this is a measurement of how well people work together. And then E stands for efficiency and flow, and this is the ability to complete work or make process with minimal interruptions and delays. And that's back to the context switch that I mentioned earlier. So you can see here how diverse this metric is. We start like something like it's very business related, like, hey, how many pull requests do you do? How many modules are you releasing? But it's also about satisfaction. It's also about your efficiency and flow and this kind of stuff. And obviously you can see how all of them are important, either directly on business impacts or on well-being and satisfaction of developers, which is also, in the end of the day, translate to direct business impacts.
Beldet, what do you
Yeah,
think? There's a lot of goodness
there's
in
there is
what?
there is a lot of good things there, but as Baruch mentioned, it's not easy to have measurable items. It's not, how do you define measurable? On what do you want to do that? On line of codes, on pulling items, on Jira tickets? What's the point of measuring something? And maybe if we go from a management perspective, they want to see numbers. Like we've measured like this week we did like 20 tickets, or this week we did like 3 new updates. That's measurable for them. But I don't think that's boosting productivity for developers on the other side. Just it can be 10 lines of codes, or it can be good written and have only 3 lines of codes. So it's the same outcome, but not the real good measurement. So I'd like to combine more like small items, how to measure things, and based on this SMART framework that we have, they are specific, they are measurable. They have to be like what was the achievable, relevant goals, time-bound goals, and then maybe also having a look at the social side, like let them measure their own. Ask them, are you fine with yourself? Are you happy with your thing you did this week? What do you think can you achieve next week? To have things on that level, maybe the developer feel better, they will boost their productivity, and you will have much more better outcomes.
And this is, I completely agree, this is a great point. In the end of the day, there are 2 views on employees in general and developers in particular. The first is, hey, they are a resource that needs to be managed and controlled. And this comes from like the old school of managing people in factories or maybe on the field and this kind of stuff, with the carrot and the stick idea of motivation, and this obviously doesn't work with intellectual workers as developers. There is another problem that developers are mostly different from other people, especially in business, and very different from their managers, who are not technical people, by the way we look, the way we speak, the way we live our lives as nerds and geeks. And this obviously creates alienation and kind of, I wouldn't say fright, but at least a lack of trust and understanding, right? So especially in the organizations which are not born as IT organizations, think about maybe a legacy bank that has an IT department. People from outside will look at this IT department as like something that we are not sure what their motivation is. All they want to do is kind of play with their toys, and learn new programming languages to put on their resumes. So there is a lot of mistrust going on, and because of that, a lot of the times you can see those views that, hey, those developers need to be kept on a short leash and measured very particularly, because otherwise they will just like run rampart and do their stuff that won't benefit us, so they need to be controlled. And this is where where like a kind of a weird metrics, for example, the lines of code nonsense comes from, because if you don't understand how developers think and work and how they are productive, what makes them productive and what makes them tick, you try to look under the lamppost and find easy metrics that you can measure, control, and understand those people. Now, obviously, that it doesn't work. What really works is the assumption of good intention of professional people. And once you assume that everybody are there to do the right thing, then the real conversation about developer productivity can begin. And this is exactly to Valdet's point about asking what is going on. In the end of the day, both Space and any other good developer productivity framework is about a combination of measured metrics and human interaction and interviews. And if you go to the best organizations that measure and improve developer productivity, you will find that they do exactly that. They have the dashboards of how long the build times are and how many PRs were merged during a certain period of time, but they also conduct constantly interviews and conversations with developers to ask for a subjective perspective of how people feel about their productivity, what are the bottlenecks, what stands in their way, and how they can achieve more satisfaction. The S, the first metric in Space framework, the satisfaction, can be only measured as a social science, as a bunch of anecdotes which actually represent data when you process them correctly.
Veldet, do you have anything to add to that before I ask the next question?
I just wanted to add one thing. I've used to do it on another company years before. We've implemented the OKR, I think it's called the objective key results, where we had small teams defining their own goals. You know, they of course they have to be aligned with companies' strategic ways, but they defined their own goals and they had 3 months to achieve them. Almost every 3 months they had new goals and they achieved them. Almost 80, 90%. So this was letting them do what they like to do, you know, and they will do it. That's a good point, I think, just to add it here.
It's definitely the carrot when you can help pick your own metrics, especially based on what you're good at. So you both alluded to the S, right, in those frameworks, but satisfaction, right, where there's a bit of social science, a little bit of measurement. How do issues like tool chain friction or maybe a slow CI/CD feedback loops impact the developer satisfaction and really like software supply chain security? So how does that satisfaction and friction in the tool chain or feedback loops affect this? So Veldet, why don't we start with you first on this one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, how to say? I mean, when we go into tool chain and that friction, I think we also have to talk about continuous integration and development of all the tools. How long it takes, about to lose the flow or to bypass checks altogether, to delay that also mass critical security missteps, to have many small pieces of a puzzle to bring it together, to not kill that friction, but to really boost it up. Maybe we need to prioritize on some different things, not just like creating, building, developing, bring the productivity, everything, but we need to have reliable feedback, to have automated security guardrails, to have those policies working. Those I don't like to talk about the waterfall system as it really outdated, but things have to have a great order. Everyone needs to know what's going to happen next and what will come back. So I hope this makes kind of sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love it, and you are 100% correct. I would suggest looking at the faster feedback problem by trying to understand what feedback is. And we actually have two types of feedback when we do when we work with on code. The first is synchronous feedback. And synchronous feedback is what you get when you type your code in your IDE and it marks it red immediately and you know that you did something wrong. On the other side of this spectrum will be your CI, your CD, your deployment to production. It might take long time, and getting feedback might take even longer time, because the real quality that matters is the quality that your users and customers see, and for that quality to get back to you with the feedback can take a long time. So this is kind of our scale, and on this scale, the real border between synchronous and asynchronous feedback will be your commit and push to version control, right? So everything before you commit and push, you want to know immediately if you did the right thing. And as I mentioned, IDE is one type of this feedback, like the syntax highlight in IDE. The other would be the test that you run locally just to check that it works. And then it might be like your local build that you also run locally to check that it works before you commit. So those types of checks is something that you wait for. And this is where it's the utmost important, the speed of those processes, right? Think about what happened if you have long tests inside your builds. You might decide to skip them. You might decide, as Valden just mentioned, right, to skip maybe some security checks that take longer time. And this is obviously a very bad idea for the quality of your code. Yes, you feel that your productivity has improved, but did it really? Now, because what happens next after you committed this unchecked, untested code is that CI will kick in, and CI will forcibly run all the tests that you skipped. And because you skipped the test and something fell through the cracks, the build, the possibility that the build will fail increases dramatically. And obviously, next thing you know, you will be kicked out of your flow by a falling build, and you will have to switch back to fix the issues that you had instead of working with what you already start working. So we can start thinking about the validations that we need to do in those two buckets. What are the validations that are critical to do and they need to be synchronous? And what are the validations that we can defer to the asynchronous part of the feedback, and that will be our CI/CD loops. So stuff like longer checks, maybe non-functional requirements like performance, or even some of the security and compliance parts, maybe they can be deferred or maybe not. And if they cannot be deferred, if we need them in this short loop of synchronous feedback, how do we make them as fast as possible? So I won't be tempted to skip them in order to speed up my build.
I thought it was interesting. Ooh, go ahead, Valdet.
I just want to ask, like, it also might be like a risk multiplier. You know, if it takes too long, developers might create workarounds, might skip security assessment, and this is like a really risk multiplier for the software at the end. So that pipeline, those misconfigurations, those outdated components, this is everything we should have to mention. We should take care of to have that DPA in place.
Couldn't have said that better myself. You read my mind from over here in DC. Valdet. So we've talked a lot about the toolchain friction. What is DPE? How does it affect developers? Some of the social science behind it. Can you share some real world examples where, an example of where DPE kind of changed, significantly impacted the developer experience or the release velocity? Do you have any examples that you can share with us today?
Yeah, so there are a lot of companies that really invested those days into developer productivity, And obviously their results speak for themselves. There are a number of interesting researches that actually prove that both the quality and the cadence of developer productivity of the code that is released is improved dramatically for the companies that specialize in developer productivity. And I'll just give you a couple of names that companies that really pay attention to that, and as a result deliver faster and better quality software. For example, LinkedIn is very invested in developer productivity, Spotify, Netflix, and even Meta now, when they kind of reinvent themselves in the post-Facebook era, I think are really leading this effort in both research and implementation of developer productivity engineering. So there is a lot of interesting companies that are also very vocal about both of what they are doing and how they are doing it. That is interesting to read and check. I think in September there is a conference called Developer Productivity Engineering Summit, DP Summit, in San Francisco, organized by our friends at Gradle. And a lot of those companies have speakers there that speak about how developer productivity engineering is critical for their work. If I recall correctly, Gradle publishes the talks online. So if you cannot be there for a time of the conference, which I highly recommend to do, to actually go there, especially if that's your job, you can still watch the recordings from past years and learn a lot from those companies, which are really on the frontier of developer productivity engineering.
Yeah, definitely on the
Yeah,
cutting edge with those big companies.
exactly,
On some of that.
absolutely. I fully agree. Maybe just one, not that really hard or the best examples from the real world, but and I think we're making the loop to have everything closed again here. It's all about listening to people basically and understand what they want. We had some use cases where we have developed some workflow approvals and all the steps for some customers. And one time we just took the paper from the customer and looked at it, and it was like horrible. We had more experienced people on our side, and now it was more like telling them what's good and what's best practice and why it is so, and why to believe us. On the other side, we had to bring our best people, our best developers, our best senior developers, to make them believe this is the best way. And then by letting the developer explain the solution to them, the trust became to get better and bigger, and the developer was crazy to deliver that stuff to them. So he just started and doing that thing because they believed in his solution, and it just boosted up. So it was a real good experience, just to tell people, listen to people with great experience, which use established frameworks, and are sure and right doing the thing.
Yeah. I think that's a powerful thing too, when you can have people speak in the same language to their peers. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's not just someone else from a different part of the organization telling you it's a good idea, right? It's someone who has experience, who's been in the trenches, who knows how this works. And I think that's kind of where that magic comes in, is that peer-to-peer conversation, because it's the same language. So, we're almost at time here, but I think we've talked a lot about what it should be, what it could be, but as we started, right, Baruch, you talked about a lot of what developer productivity is not, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's go back to that first thought. And what are some of the signs that a team is optimizing for the wrong reasons? And how do you realign those efforts with both security and business goals? Because we do see this happening a lot in the industry. And I think this is a good way to kind of wrap this conversation, where people can maybe self-reflect and see kind of what they're doing and make sure they're doing it for the right reasons, or kind of recalibrate to get back on track.
Yeah. So first of all, just to make sure, the stuff that I mentioned in the beginning is not what developer productivity not. It is
Right. Right.
very much developer productivity. It's what developer productivity engineering is not, right?
Yeah.
So stuff like getting enough sleep at night and being in an excellent mental state is very much developer productivity. Is like as developer productivity as it can be. It's just not developer productivity engineering. Now, stuff which is completely not developer productivity will be a complete disregard for some of the aspects of the space framework that we mentioned, for example, satisfaction, like grinding the developers until they burn out, might in the beginning satisfy some of those letters like the action and deliverables, but definitely in the end of the day has nothing to do with developer productivity in general. Now, what else I would mention is something that hurtles developer productivity, although it doesn't look like. For example, the requirements that a certain developer team will cover all the aspects of software engineering. Right, and this is going back straight to security because, as we already mentioned, security is an extremely complicated topic that is generally outside of the domain of developers and developer teams. So yes, some teams might get lucky to have a security expert on their team as part of the empowered team, going back to DevOps and what's not. But this is an exception to the rule. But what we see sometimes in the industry that, again, requirements from people who don't understand much will be like, hey, you are a developer, make sure that there are no security vulnerabilities in your code. Or stuff like, hey, implement some kind of complicated security checks and procedures without understanding of what it actually means from both sides. And this obviously might sound like, hey, this is very productive. We don't spend extra resources on time on this stuff, but it's obviously counterproductive because in the end of the day, it will hurt developer productivity, both in people's satisfaction, that you make them do what they didn't sign up for, don't love to do, and not necessarily know how to do, and in business aspects as well, because delivering software which is full of security bugs is not something that you can attribute as a great business productivity as well. So knowing where people can and want to focus, and then delegate the rest to other people or other specialists with different expertise is definitely very important for developer productivity, although might sound counterproductive to some, like, hey, we're spending time and money on those consultants or buying those tools and integrating them instead of trusting our developers to do the right thing when they cannot.
Yeah. Valdez, what do you
Absolutely.
think?
Absolutely agree. I mean, that's a good question, and I think it's all about trying to balancing those things. On the other side, the world is really rapidly, dynamically. We have to ship, we have to deliver fast, and to be more productive, to do more things, to do more of that. But I think exactly those things are the wrong things to think of. It's better getting more time to have lead time to recovery, to measure maybe those security incidents, to have a great solution, to maybe try to put more time in something and have a great outcome, and not just bring that thing up, create it. That's not the good thing. That's really those warning signs, to have high velocity on frequently rollbacks, to have I don't know, security always being the last step. Don't care about it. We take care about it. Put it one step back. Put it one step back, and then when it crashes somehow, you have to do everything again, and it gets even more expensive as if you would do it from the first step. So having a great plan is a good plan.
I think you also have to be a little creative with that plan. So making sure that you might have to tweak that plan depending on how things change, because attack surface vectors are always changing. So you just have to make sure you're little flexible on that plan. But I do agree, you need a good plan, a strong plan to stick by.
I've heard something last or 2 weeks. Without a plan, you're planning to fail. So
I'm gonna have to reuse that. That's pretty good. So we're about at time. For those of you at home, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I think one free resource, I know we talked about a lot of different resources, and for the on-demand version, we'll make sure we put them in the description. So Baruch went through a lot, Valdette gave a few. We have a free resource here for this community. It's called SecureThe, and this is where you can actually look at different packages and get their safe assessment score based on 6 different criteria, ranging from hardening, tampering, malware, vulnerability, and also a few other great things. So, I think the last thing that I want to ask, I'm waiting to see if we have a couple of questions, but I personally have one, is, what parting words of wisdom would you give for someone where, they've heard this developer productivity engineering for a while, but they're kind of not sure where to start? Where would you suggest they start investigating this, or just becoming more knowledgeable on the subject, or first steps they could take in trying to implement a stronger velocity team? Did you?
if you asked us something, I was off for some seconds.
I might have lost that. You might have lost me. I was just gonna ask, is what is your final, words of wisdom for folks just starting out who are looking at this topic with fresh eyes?
Well, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So
Yeah.
it's always good to have a goal in mind. What are my short terms, my long terms? Where do I want to be in 5 years, in 10 years? Do I always want to stack in an, I don't know, 8-hour shift developing code, or do I want to go further and further and maybe be like a lead engineer and so on? Having right trainings, having security awareness trainings, having the right certificates, dealing with the right people around you, learning from other people. So just to make sure you're getting the right things.
Yeah, and I would also suggest learning, right? This is everything that we spoke about today are topics worth learning and exploring. Did we make you curious about Space Framework? Excellent. Go ahead and read about it. Are you now suddenly worried that you are not as expert at security as you thought you are? That's great. That's a great opportunity to learn more and see what aspects do you have covered and what's not. Always be learning, I would say, is the best advice I can give to people who are just started in software engineering. It's such a fast paced evolving industry that you just have to now with AI it's going through the roof.
You always have to be curious. Be like
Absolutely.
my mom always said, be like Alice from Alice in Wonderland. Just keep being curious.
Oh yes.
Well, Baruch and Valdette, thank you so much for today's conversation. I really enjoyed it. I know I personally learned a lot. For those of you at home, thanks for tuning in. I know Joanna had put some of our resources in the webinar chat, but feel free to tune in next month where we'll be talking with 2 experts in the industry about threat modeling. Till next time, thanks guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.